Hey, middle schoolers. This is Mr. Sikora, your friendly school librarian, reporting from my basement bunker, or my temporary classroom from where I am teaching lessons and making videos for all of you. I was asked today to speak specifically to 8th graders about scary books, and I will do that. I'll make some videos for that, but I wanted to first make a short video about something I've been thinking about. I've been thinking a lot about something that I would just call first encounters. Okay? It was when I was in 8th grade that you're really kind of growing out of all of the kinds of books that feel childish, that feel like middle school, material. And it isn't that those books are bad at all, but your preferences of what you want to read about and things of that nature are changing. And adults, librarians, teachers, other people would always come to me and give me suggestions. They were oftentimes what they loved, which, they remember reading, and what sticks out is classics. And when I was in 8th grade and people were recommending classic literature, and I would go out and try to read it, which I would try to read it, it would be not always successful. I'd read it and I'd think, I don't get the language. This isn't how I speak or how I think. The themes aren't necessarily things I'm interested in, the storylines and plots. Sometimes I don't care who marries who in a when I was in 8th grade in some Victorian novel. I just wasn't interested in those kinds of things. And I remember having those experiences, but I still went out. And I remember seeing, just as you'll probably see in your life, lists of books that are like the 100 greatest books ever written, or the 100 greatest books in the English language, and things of that nature. And those are really cool lists from which you can take and experiment with at your age. You can go out and try. And you may find that a lot of the books are not something you find interesting at all. And I want to argue that not only is it useful to try to read those things, but it will be ultimately deeply rewarding. I'm not saying that you have to finish them all the time. I remember reading things when I was in high school, in particular, like I read Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, and I read it for a class. I think I was in the 9th grade when I read it, so a year above where you guys are right now. And I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. I didn't find it interesting. I understood the plot, but there was nothing about it that really kept my attention or made me want to keep reading it. And I came across that quite a bit. Now, sometimes you will come across something that might hit you just right. When it was in high school, early high school, is when I discovered Kurt Vonnegut. Here's a Kurt Vonnegut play that he actually wrote. And Kurt Vonnegut was exciting right off the bat. It was easy to read. It made sense. It was funny. It had a lot of thought-provoking ideas and things that I understood and things I connected with as a young person. All right, and because he doesn't have a lot of respect for authority, and I think that in turn is attractive to young people. All right, fun stuff. But going back to the books that don't hit you right, you read it and you're like, what use is this? There's a couple things. One, it does introduce you to what is commonly referred to as the canon, which is the collection of literature that is considered worthwhile, valuable, and great. Okay? And understanding what is in the canon, okay, that's a weird word, I know, the canon, will help you in life, particularly in things like job interviews or when you read other literature or other things that refer or allude to something in the canon. If you're at a business party, all right, you're a young professional and someone says, oh man, that's very Kafkaesque, and you have no idea who Kafka is, and you're just going to be like, yeah, you're going to come across as being uneducated. You don't want that. So that's one thing. And that's the most shallow thing I'm going to talk about. The most rewarding part of trying to read these things and not necessarily succeeding in loving it immediately is when you return to it later. When I was in college, I talked about how I read Great Expectations and a couple other Charles Dickens things. Like, you guys have already read The Christmas Carol, all right? And I didn't really like them. But when I was in college, I went back and I read Great Expectations. And it hit me, and I don't know what changed. It was hilarious. I found humor in it. There's so much humor in A Christmas Carol, for example, that I did not get when I first tried reading it as a young person. And I think part of what was so great about it, about discovering that I now like something, was not that it isn't like the book changed at all. All right? Those are permanent records. They're there. They don't change. But now I suddenly went from hating something, or not really hating, just not really getting it, to suddenly really finding myself like laughing from the gut at this book. The book didn't change, but I did. And there's something really rewarding about noticing those moments in your life when you are able to return to something or able to recognize a change in yourself. Classic literature will always be rewarding most of the time. I still don't like Scarlet Letter. Ugh, sorry. Tessa D'Uberville's, But there's quite a bit that is amazing. I remember the Iliad and reading the Iliad and the Odyssey when I was young, or like the idea of epic poetry. How am I supposed to connect to these ancient poems? One of my favorites is Beowulf, a 1,000-year-old poem. All right? I would have never thought it would be fun or interesting. And I think part of it is when I first read Beowulf, I'm sitting down there and I'm focusing the whole time on trying just to understand the words and understand the plot and understand what's happening. And I wasn't able to enjoy it. As I aged and my vocabulary grew and the way that I understood language and the complexity of language grew, I was able to read it not to myself, but when I really found out it was great was when I read it out loud, just as it was almost certainly performed 1,000 years ago. All right? This was not meant just to sit in a book somewhere, because most people didn't read 1,000 years ago. It was meant to be recited, to be shared. And when reading it out loud, it becomes incredibly exciting. And people are asking you questions and you like answer them, and it's this awesome thing. And so, gosh, interact with classic literature. That's all I'm saying. Look up those lists, 100 greatest, books. Look up your favorite, a lot of times you might have celebrities or musicians that publish what their favorite books are, and sometimes they're quite very literary. Look up what those are. Start exploring things that you might not like, because eventually you will, and you'll get a lot out of that change. It's super worthwhile. Peace out.